Myself, Milan Patel, Assistant Professor at LG Institute of Engineering and Technology. Today's topic is Advancements in Civil Engineering. In today's lecture, we will cover first, development of riverfronts, second, heritage structures and its conservation, and lastly, we will cover features of earthquake resistant structures. So without wasting much time, let's begin with development of riverfronts. In this topic, we will cover first introduction of riverfronts, quality criteria of riverfront development, various aims and objectives of riverfronts, elements for successful waterfront development, and the principles for sustainable waterfront development. Okay, let's begin with the introduction of riverfront development. A riverfront is the region along a river, often in large cities that border a river. The riverfront will be lined with marines, docks, parks, trees, or minor attractions. Riverfront projects are essentially riverbank beautification and real estate development projects, and not helping restoration of the river. Okay, the projects aim to co-modifying the rivers to develop urban space. The activities that are promoted on the riverfronts typically include promenades, boat trips, shopping, petty shops, restaurants, theme parks, walkways, and even parking lots in enclosed riverbed. Okay, these are the 5 riverfront development in India. First is Sabarmati riverfront development, which is in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Second is Gomti riverfront development, which is in Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh. Third is Yamuna riverfront development, which is in Delhi. Fourth is Pune riverfront development, which is in Mula and Mutha river, Maharashtra. Fifth is Brahmaputra riverfront development, which is in Assam. Okay, these are the 5 riverfront developments in India. Now let's discuss the quality criteria for riverfront development. First is accessibility to riverfront should be easy. Sufficient space on the bank of the river should be there. Continuous connectivity along the riverfront is required. Open spaces like parks, playgrounds, gardens should be there. Publicity of this riverfront should be necessary. Sustainability of the construction of riverfront development should be necessary. Cleanliness and unpolluted water of the river is required. Safety and health of the people should be maintained. Comfort and security of the people who will visit this riverfront development should be proper. And lastly, quality of water and environment of water should be properly conserved while construction of riverfront development. Okay, these are the various quality criteria for riverfront development. Now, let's see aims and objectives of riverfront development. First, it is used for beautification of riverfront banks and urban space. It is used for commercial development of the area. It is used to develop recreational facilities. Okay? It is used for removal of encouragement and land acquisition for riverbank beautification and related development works. It is used for restriction or banning of certain activities on riverbank or in the river. It is used for development or restoration of riverbank area. It is used for prevention of discharge of treated and untreated sewage into the river through construction of sewage and nala diversion works. It is used for conservation of environment and ecology of the water. It is used for development of social infrastructure surrounding this riverfront. It is used for sustainable development of whole city. Okay, this is the various aims and objectives of riverfront development. Now let's discuss elements for successful waterfront development. These are the various points to be considered for successful waterfront development, like construction technology, project theme and image, effective management, beginning the project, financial feasibilities, environmental approach, public perception of need of this waterfront development, function of this waterfront development, and authenticity of this development. Okay. Now let's move to the principles of sustainable waterfront development. Secure the quality of water and the environment. Waterfronts are the parts of the existing urban fabric. The historic identity gives the character. Mixed use is a priority. Public access is a prerequisite. Planning in public-private partnerships speeds the process. Public participation is an element of sustainability. Revitalization is an ongoing process. Waterfronts are long-term projects. Waterfront profits from international networking. Okay, these are the various principles for sustainable waterfront development. Okay, now let's see the advantages of sustainable waterfront development. It creates meaningful public spaces to enhance city life. It improves the spatial structure and habitat of riverfront and adjoining areas. It promotes recreational and commercial activities. It helps city to develop as a major commercial and service center. It increases the entertainment function and also allows opportunity for nightlife for the city. It became major tourist attraction of the city. It creates opportunity for transportation from one place to another place, which can promote the trade of the city. Okay. There are also some disadvantages of this waterfront development, like the natural waterway of the river is contracted due to the construction of riverfront. It may cause flooding in adjoining area of riverfront. There is a change in flow regime of the river and siltation on the riverbed. It may harm the natural microhabitat of water and it can affect the overall environment. Large quantity of water is required to feed water in the river. Okay, water can also be breeding ground for insects and other animals. Okay, and the overall construction cost is very high. These are the various disadvantages of waterfront development. Okay, that's all about development of riverfronts. Now let's move to the second topic in today's lecture, which is heritage structures and its conservation. In which first we will discuss what is heritage structures, what is the need for conservation of these heritage structures, what are the various factors affects the deterioration of heritage structures, principle of conservation of these heritage structures, and how we can conserve these heritage structures. Okay, let's begin with introduction. Heritage is deemed to mean those buildings, structures, areas, and precincts that are historic, aesthetic, architectural, or cultural significance and should include natural features within such area or precincts of environmental significance or scenic beauty such as sacred groves, hills, lochs, water bodies, and the areas adjoining the sea or some open area or wooded area, etc. Okay. What is the need of conservation of this heritage structure? It provides character and distinctive identity of the various cities. History of Indian rulers is embodied in the heritage structures. The historic building gives uniqueness to a particular place. Historic structures manifest traditions, skills, and customs of Indian culture. Built heritage structures teaches us excellent construction practices prevailing in ancient India. It helps in developing tourism in our country. Okay, it is a source of revenue for the government and many poor people survive on these various structures. The heritage structures improve aesthetics of the area and helps in conservation of environment. Heritage structures have high architectural, historical, spiritual, social, and economical values. That's why conservation of this heritage structure is necessary. Okay. Now let's discuss various factors affecting deterioration of heritage structures. First is natural factors. It includes moisture, vibrations, earthquakes, flooding, temperature, air pollution, etc. Second is social factors like fire, urban development, vandalism, etc. Okay, these are the two main factors which are affecting deterioration of heritage structures. Okay, now let's discuss the principles of conservation of these heritage structures. First is community participation. While planning and implementing any strategy for conservation of heritage structures, active participation and involvement of the local community is important. It helps in utilizing resources to the best possible extent. Okay. Second is well-being of local community. Permitting local people to establish service stalls near the heritage structure results in economic improvement of local community. Okay. Third is creating an urban identity and pride. Conservation strategy must include regions, historical, natural, and cultural values to build strong urban identity and pride. Fourth is preserve local culture. It should take care of both tangible and intangible heritage. Okay, and the fifth is integrate sustainability. The conservation strategy should integrate the long-term sustainability goals of the whole region. Okay, these are the various principles or the points to be considered while conservation of these heritage structures. Okay. Now let's discuss how you can conserve these heritage structures. The Archaeological Survey of India (ASI) has an attached office under the Department of Culture Ministry. Okay, the Tourism and Culture is the premier organization for the archaeological researches and protection of cultural heritage of the nation. The organization has a large workforce of trained archaeologists, conservators, epigraphists, architects, and scientists for conducting archaeological research projects through its excavation branches, prehistory branch, epigraphic branch, science branch, horticulture branch, building survey projects, temple survey projects, and underwater archaeology wing. Okay. The Archaeological Survey of India's Science Branch is responsible mainly for chemical conservation treatment and preservation of some 3,593 protected monuments, besides chemical conservation of museum and excavated objects countrywide. Okay? UNESCO World Heritage sites in India are shown in this picture. Okay? That's why conservation of heritage structure is necessary. Okay? That's all about heritage structure and its conservation. Let's discuss the third topic in today's lecture, which is features of earthquake resistant structures. In which first we will discuss the introduction of earthquake resistant structures, and then we will discuss its features. Okay? First, what is earthquake resistant structures? Design of earthquakes, behavior of the building and structures depends not only on structure design, but also it depends on shape of the building, size or dimension of the building, and geometry of the building. Okay, these are the parameters which are decided at the planning stage. Planners and architects should consider these parameters in consultation with structural engineer to avoid unfavorable features. That means some more attractive features may be eliminated to ensure the safety of the building. Okay. Now let's see various features of earthquake resistant buildings. First is dimensions of the building. Second is plyometric shape of the building. Third is vertical layout of the building. Fourth is buildings on sloping ground. Fifth is discontinuity in load transfer. Sixth is adjacency of buildings. Seventh is symmetry. Eighth is regularity. Ninth is separation. 10th is simplicity, and the 11th is connectivity or continuity. Now let's discuss one by one. First is dimension of the buildings. Buildings blocks with any building should behave like a solid body for minimum damage. Any building have three dimensions: length, width and height. If any dimension is very small or very large compared to other two dimensions, then it gives unfavorable shape to the structure and it causes various damage in earthquake. Okay, in figure you can clearly see various unfavorable shapes of the building. Building should not be too tall, too long or too large in plan. Second point of feature is planimetric shape of the building. From the past earthquakes, it has been observed that buildings with simple geometry or layout in plan have suffered lesser damage compared to the different type of shapes like plus type of shape, U type of shape, T shape. Okay, it should be neglected. Simple plan is good compared to the corners and curve plan. Okay, if you have to provide this type of plans like plus, U or T type of plan, then you have to provide separation joints between two blocks like this. Okay, the buildings with complicated shapes like U, V, H and plus were severely damaged during earthquakes. Okay. Third is vertical layout of the buildings. The main purpose of building is to provide shelter, that means roof. Okay. Huge weight of roofs and floors to be transferred to the soil along the heights through shortest path of the building. Okay. The deviation or discontinuity in transfer of load will result in poor performance of the building. Variation in height will cause variation in earthquake force at the intersection line or portion of different heights. In this figure, you can clearly see various setbacks of the building. It should be neglected while planning phase. Okay, weak or flexible stories are also neglected. Okay. Fourth is building on sloping ground. On sloping ground, the height of columns, number of floors and load varies. Okay, hence the result in unequal distribution of forces, including earthquake force over entire structure, resulting in larger damage. Okay, so for sloping ground, you have to take some proper care in the design of the building. Okay. Fifth is discontinuity in load transfer. Sometimes planner is tempted to discontinue column or certain story for providing large interrupted spaces. Okay, like this. Okay, in first floor, one column is missing. Okay, because the user requires some large space. Okay, this should be neglected. Okay, floating column or hanging column should not be there in any building because it creates discontinuity in load transfer of the columns, which leads to unequal distribution of forces that creates risk during earthquakes. Okay. Sixth is adjacency of the buildings. During strong earthquake, tall buildings help swing action like this. Okay. When distance between two buildings is less, then the top corners of the building will collide like this. Okay, which may result in large damage to the extent of collapse of both the buildings like this. Seventh is symmetry. Building plans should be symmetrical about X as well as Y axis. Load distribution also should be symmetrical about horizontal and vertical axis to avoid twisting of the building. Okay, boards and windows also should be provided symmetrically about all axes to avoid unequal distribution of loads. Okay. 8 is regularity. Simple rectangular plan should be preferred. Rectangular blocks should be separated to avoid collision between blocks. Length of the block should be less than 3 times the width of the blocks. Okay. 9th is separation. If longer blocks are unavoidable, then 2 separate blocks with enough separation joints should be planned. Separation of blocks can be used to achieve symmetry and regularity. Separation gap between two blocks should be treated like expansion joint by filling weak and resilient material. 10th is simplicity. Decorative architectural elements like cornices, cantilever, fascia stones, etc. can prove to be fatal during earthquake. Okay, so it should be neglected while planning or while construction of the building. Where such decorative elements are unavoidable, proper care should be taken to avoid the collapse of these elements. Okay, and the last is connectivity or continuity. Crucial structural elements like columns, beams, roof should be properly connected in the building. Stairs between floors should be properly anchored to the beam. Shear wall and dampers should be provided appropriately in tall buildings. Ensure ductility in building to ensure the safety of the building. Okay, these are the 4 points to be considered for proper connectivity or continuity in load transfer. Okay, that's all about the features of earthquake resistant structures. I hope you all understand these three topics: development of riverfronts, heritage structures and its conservation, and various features of earthquake resistant structures. That's all about this chapter. See you soon in the next lecture.